Our scripture for this evening will be Matthew chapter 9, verses 1 through 4. Matthew chapter 9, verses 1 through 4. If you are a fan of the big screen, you are no doubt familiar with famed director Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino has been involved in projects like Pulp Fiction, the Kill Bill series, Django Unchained, starring Jamie Foxx. He has won at least 2 Academy Awards, among other recognitions and accolades. He has a net worth of somewhere around $120 million. What is interesting and, in fact, unfortunate about him is that during his humble beginnings, he did not excel well in school. But he had a passion for writing and would often find himself writing in class during a time in which he was supposed to be doing other activities. His mother got on his case about it and told him that he had to get his grades together, and said something to the effect of, "This little writing thing that you're doing, it's going to stop." Quentin Tarantino was a child when his mother told him that, and he determined as a child that when he became a successful writer, that she would not benefit from 1 penny of his earnings, that he would not buy her a house, he would not be like Elvis and buy Cadillacs, and he would not allow her to benefit since she said what she said about him needing to stop writing. Of course, as a mother, she was not trying to discourage his interest in writing. She was simply trying to get him to focus on his education and not write at the time that was supposed to be allotted to other areas of academic study. Unfortunately, he has harbored this evil in his heart to the extent that outside of helping her with some IRS problems, to date, as he has recently spoken, he has yet to buy her a house or buy her a car to help her financially. How unfortunate that such a creative mind could harbor such resentment, such vindictiveness, such evil in his heart. At least that's what it appears. And certainly he has a perspective and she would have a perspective. And it is not our place to cast judgment on him. It is only our place to recognize the need to examine ourselves to make sure that we're not guilty of harboring evil in our own hearts. Notice these words in Matthew chapter 9, beginning in verse 1. And he entered into a ship and passed over and came into his own city. And behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. And behold, certain of the scribes said within themselves, This man blasphemes. And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, Wherefore think you evil in your hearts? Or why do you harbor evil in your hearts? Jesus criticizes these individuals because their assumptions were negative. They assumed evil because they were themselves evil. When we consider the idea of thinking evil or entertaining evil or just pondering an evil thought, we have to be careful because when we allow evil in any form to take root, it becomes nourished and cultivates over time as we continue to feed it with negative emotions and with people around us who can feed that negativity. And at some point it manifests itself and it harvests and it is seen in different ways in which we play it out. Sometimes it's our attitude, sometimes it's our speech, sometimes it's our behavior. When we talk about evil and harboring evil in our hearts, we tend to think of the most extreme examples of evil. And I would argue that in some sense, the worst kind of evil is that which is subtle, that which does not seem like a major sin, as we might call it. And I would say such evils are worse because they are subtle and because we don't give as much attention to them, because we don't focus on them, because we don't assume them to be in a category that's detrimental to us. But evil is evil. Sin is sin. In the case of this passage, we have to be careful, number one, about making negative assumptions about other people because of the evil that's in our hearts. We have to also be careful, number two, about arrogance in ourselves, to think that we are high enough to look down on anybody else. When we think about harboring such evil thoughts, what do we get by being evil? Better yet, what do we lose because of evil thoughts? When we talk about evil, some of us would say we would never dare to be like a Quentin Tarantino and keep our mother from having some enjoyment of our life success. Some of us would say that we would never be like these people in Matthew chapter 9 who criticized Jesus and assumed evil. But sometimes we can have evil thoughts simply just by being angry. And sometimes people are angry all the time and angry at every little thing. It can be bitterness, it can be envy, it could be jealousy, it could be sexual desire, it could be covetousness. Evil can manifest itself in many different ways. But we must be very careful that as we take a look at others and become critical of others, that we miss what may be a seed taking root in our hearts. So the encouragement to each of us is not to pass judgment on a Quentin Tarantino, not to even pass judgment on those in Matthew chapter 9, but to humbly seek God's guidance in assessing ourselves to make sure that we're not guilty of harboring evil in our thoughts. Because just as Jesus asked them the question in verse 4, why think you evil in your hearts, or why do you harbor evil? How many times have he looked at us, especially with those subtle sins, and say, why do you harbor evil in your heart? So let's be on guard and make sure that we don't allow sin to take root, because that which doesn't take root cannot grow. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.